How did a company that makes rubber tires become the ultimate judge of global fine dining? If you walk into the most exclusive restaurants on Earth, you will find chefs sweating over plates with a level of intensity usually reserved for open-heart surgery. They are chasing a symbol, a tiny flower-shaped icon that can make them a millionaire overnight, or, if taken away, can bankrupt their business and destroy their life's work. And yet, this symbol of absolute culinary perfection was invented by two brothers in a dirty rubber factory, simply because they wanted people to wear down their tires faster. To understand how the world's most prestigious award is actually just a 120-year-old marketing gimmick, we have to go back to France in the year 1000. At this time, the automobile was not a necessity. It was a terrifying, loud, and incredibly expensive toy for the ultra-rich. There were fewer than 3,000 cars in all of France. The roads were mostly unpaved dirt tracks. Gasoline had to be bought in small glass bottles at local pharmacies. Driving anywhere was a massive inconvenience. And this was a massive problem for Édouard and André Michelin. They had recently taken over a failing rubber factory in Clermont-Ferrand, and they had bet their entire future on pneumatic car tires. But you cannot sell replacement tires to people who leave their cars parked in a garage. The Michelin brothers needed a way to manufacture demand. They didn't just need people to drive. They needed people to drive long, grueling distances. They needed to engineer a shift in consumer behavior. So they came up with an idea. In August of 1900, they published the first Michelin Guide. It was a red 400-page booklet that they printed 35,000 copies of and gave away entirely for free. If you looked inside this original guide, you wouldn't find pretentious reviews of caviar and truffles. It was a survival manual. It showed drivers how to change a tire, where to buy fuel, and listed a few modest inns where you could sleep and get a hot meal if your car broke down. It was brilliant consumer psychology. By planting the idea that exploring the French countryside was a glamorous adventure, Michelin was quietly nudging the wealthy elite to take road trips. More road trips meant more friction. More friction meant bald tires, and bald tires meant Michelin stayed in business. For 20 years, this strategy worked flawlessly. The guide became a staple in the glove box of every French motorist, but it was still just a free pamphlet. It had no real authority. Until 1920. The story goes that André Michelin was visiting a local tire distributor when he noticed something that deeply offended him. There, in a dirty garage, a stack of his beloved Michelin guides was being used to prop up a wobbly workbench. In that moment, André realized a fundamental truth of human psychology. People only respect what they pay for. He immediately stopped giving the guide away for free and put a price tag of 7 francs on it. And with that price tag came a shift in strategy. Michelin removed all the paid advertising from the book. They wanted it to feel objective, pure. They started focusing heavily on the restaurant section, realizing that food was the ultimate motivator to get the French to travel. But to make people trust their recommendations, Michelin did something unprecedented. In 1926, they hired a team of anonymous inspectors. These weren't food critics who announced their arrival and demanded free meals. They were ghosts. They booked tables under fake names, ate quietly, paid their own bills, and left without a word. This secrecy manufactured a powerful illusion of authority. Because no one knew who the inspectors were, chefs had to assume that any customer walking through the door could be the one grading their entire livelihood. It turned restaurant kitchens into high-pressure arenas. It was no longer just cooking, it was an elite sport. That same year, Michelin introduced the star. Just one single star, awarded to establishments deemed to have fine dining. By 1931, they expanded this into the 3-star hierarchy we know today. And in 1936, they finally published the official criteria for what these stars actually meant. When you read these criteria, the veil drops. You realize exactly what Michelin was doing. 1 star meant a very good restaurant in its category. 2 stars meant excellent cooking, worth a detour. 3 stars meant exceptional cuisine, worth a special journey. Look at that phrasing, a detour, a special journey. At even the absolute pinnacle of culinary prestige, the rating system was literally just a metric of how much rubber you had to burn to get there. 3 stars wasn't just a compliment to the chef, it was a directive to the consumer to get in their car and drive hundreds of miles. And yet, the culinary world swallowed it whole. Because the guide was so strict, and because they stripped away 3-star ratings as quickly as they gave them, a Michelin star became the most coveted prize on earth. Today, the economic reality of a star is staggering. If a restaurant earns its first Michelin star, business typically jumps by 20 to 30% overnight. Earning a third star transforms a local eatery into a global destination, booked out months in advance. But this manufactured authority came with a devastating human cost. By positioning themselves as the flawless judges of perfection, Michelin created an environment of psychological terror for the chefs living underneath them. Imagine playing in a sudden death championship game every single night of your life, but you don't know who the scouts are, and one bad performance ruins your career. In 2003, Bernard Loisillon, one of the most famous chefs in France, was the subject of intense media speculation that his restaurant might lose its third Michelin star. The pressure of maintaining this arbitrary standard was so heavy, so all-consuming, that before the new guide was even published, Loisillon took his own life. 13 years later, Benoit Villelier, a chef whose restaurant had just been named the best in the world, did the same. These tragedies exposed the dark underbelly of the Michelin system. The stars had become a prison. Chefs were no longer cooking for their customers, they were cooking out of fear of a tire company. But perhaps the biggest twist in the Michelin story is what the guide has quietly become today. For decades, the guide operated at a financial loss. It was a massive expense for the Michelin Corporation, maintained purely for brand prestige. But in recent years, the business model shifted. Michelin began rapidly expanding across the globe, launching guides in new cities and countries. But they aren't always doing this out of a sudden appreciation for global cuisine. They're doing it because they're being paid. Today, national and regional tourism boards quietly hand over hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars to the Michelin Guide. Governments from Florida to California to various nations in Asia effectively sponsor Michelin to come to their regions, evaluate their restaurants, and hand out stars. The illusion of total independence has quietly evolved into a highly lucrative civic marketing tool. Cities know that if they can buy a Michelin Guide for their region, wealthy tourists will follow. And so, we are left with a fascinating paradox. The Michelin Guide is criticized for being biased. It is criticized for favoring expensive European-style tasting menus. It is criticized for taking money from tourism boards and pushing chefs to the absolute brink of mental collapse. And yet, none of that matters, because the authority has already been established. The psychological anchor is set so deep in our culture that even when we know exactly how the trick is done, we still believe in the magic. Over a century ago, two brothers needed a way to sell more rubber to a country that didn't want to drive. Today, people will board international flights and spend a month's rent on a single meal, all because that same rubber company told them it was worth the trip. It is arguably the greatest, most enduring piece of consumer manipulation in modern history, a system where the judges are invisible, the rules are hidden, and the house always wins. If this is the kind of story you wish you learned years ago, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.